We get live right now, man. It's going down. Excited for the season. You know, we coming off a playoff win. I mean, you know, we had a couple wins.
Hello and welcome to episode 173 of Diaries, a Milwaukee Bucks podcast hosted by the good people at Brewhoop. I am Kyle Carr. I am back after a couple weeks. There was the Super Bowl. Had to take part in enjoying all the snacks and getting annoyed with half the commercials. But I am joined by my good friend Riley Feldman. Riley, how's it going?
It's going well, Kyle. Haven't watched a minute, much like you, of All-Star Weekend. I shouldn't say that. It was on in the background at my friend's house in the basement yesterday, but he has a little corner TV. So I did see Mac McClung biff his first attempt on a dunk, and then he got it on the second try, and that was the extent of my and the skills challenge, which notoriously the worst event that the NBA puts on an All-Star Weekend. Confusing, lackadaisical. Clearly, nobody cares, and the players. They fulfilled their end of the bargain. They look like they could not care less about what they were doing out there. So otherwise, I'm doing well. Thanks.
Yeah, I have not watched a single second. I just figured there'll be highlights later on. But no Adam today. I think he's out for, I don't remember if it was kid reasons or work reasons, but we are able to bring back Michael to the show. So Michael, how's it going?
Going well. It's great to be back. Like y'all, I didn't watch really a ton of the All-Star festivities. I did think that the Steph versus Sabrina thing was pretty cool. I liked kind of the idea of it, and I think other than some of the commentary that was a little controversial, I think that the execution was about as good as it could have been. And yeah, the skills challenge continues to be very weird, but seeing a ball bounce off of Scotty Barnes' leg made me feel like not so different between the two of us for a second at least. So
what I was really confused by is like who thought up Trae Young, Tyrese Maxey, and Scotty Barnes, who like in their mind was like, that's the trio. I get the Pacers three guys. That's fine. It's in Indianapolis, but why? I guess they were just around. They said those guys will be good. I don't know.
I just want to know why have we given up on the Shooting Stars? That was the best one. That was the best like All-Star Weekend event, in my opinion, because then you had like a legend, you'd have a WNBA player, you'd have an NBA player, and it's just like they're just trying to chuck up half-court shots. Like that was at least fun. The skills challenge, I think we just lost the plot there. Dunk contest, I don't even know who was in it. The celebrity game, I saw the names on there. I was like, I recognize some of these names. Couldn't pick out half of them. If you told me this is who it is, I wouldn't recognize half of them, but I've seen names like Puka Nacua. Yeah, I've heard of his name. I know who he is. I don't know what he looks like because he has a helmet on all the time. But I don't know. So like I don't remember who won like what events. I think like the NBA team basically lost in the Rising Stars Challenge. Is that correct?
Yeah, I remember the G League team upset the team that was like the Rising Stars. I know Jabari Smith, Victor Wembanyama. It was kind of I don't know the setup entirely, but they did get upset.
Okay.
I will as a little teaser for next week's podcast. We do have a correspondent on the ground in the arena. The plan right now is to have Jackson on, and he's going to give us a lot of the behind the scenes breakdown, and then he will be able to set the record straight as we just completely guess at what the results of all the events were, having not watched it in and of it. So as a teaser for the listeners for next week.
Yeah. Meanwhile, for the week that is, Damian Lillard won the 3-point contest again, so he defended his title. We're not going to talk about Malik Beasley in his last place performance, and that, you know, it is what it is. But much like the 3-point shootout, Milwaukee had some highs and some lows. They went out and beat the Denver Nuggets on Monday, 112-95. So actually keeping a good team under 100. That was impressive. And then they come back the next day and get shot out the gym by the Miami Heat, lose 123-97. And then Thursday happens, and as Doc Rivers said, some of the players' minds were in Cabo. The Bucks lost 113-110. So not the best week. It started off so well. We were feeling great, beating the Nuggets, did a really good job defensively, and then it all just fell out from under them. So, Michael, I'll let you go first. What did you learn from this past week in games from the Milwaukee Bucks?
Yeah, my biggest kind of takeaway, and this has kind of been a recurring theme throughout the season, but the Doc Rivers era hasn't really changed. The fact that this team kind of has two engines. There's Dame, there's Giannis. There's not a ton of pick and roll between the two of them. There's not, it's like they both kind of do their own things on offense. On defense, it's kind of, I mean, the perimeter's still horrible, but it's very much like two guys running the show, and Chris Middleton's been injured a little bit again, so now we've got Jay Crowder in the starting lineup, and it really does just seem like a big two and a lot of kind of okay. I mean, you look at the box scores, and it's very rare that someone besides Bobby Portis on the bench puts up double digit points. And when you have to have like four guys scoring double digits in your starting lineup every night to even be competitive on the court, it just gets really tiresome. It's kind of my main takeaway from this week.
Yeah. It's two engines, and they're two engines that are disconnected from one another, or it seems like they're not as connected as you would like. So it's not that they're not running pick and roll. It's not that Giannis and Dame don't play together offensively, especially, but we have yet to square the circle of the stylistic difference between an offense where Giannis is the main initiator, which is what we are very used to in these neck of the woods, and a lot of the players are used to, and then an offense where Dame is the initiator, and Dame is adjusting to not being the lead guy, and there's a lot of other stuff going on. So it like that's not helping. But yes, like two engines, neither of which are firing. Giannis is firing really well himself. Like he's a walking game winner by him. Like he goes 15 to 17 against the Grizzlies. The only guy who really showed up for the team. Bobby did okay off the bench as well. So Giannis raises the floor high enough where if the other engine comes online, you can get those wins. But since the Griffin firing, and then it's just throughout the season, we've talked about it ad nauseum on the podcast and on the site, the connection is not firing between those two yet, or within the rest of the team either. So I think that's, it's on full display this week where Chris is gone, and if Dame is not showing up and instead he's giving away the ball 4 or 5 times a game, then it's going to be a tough climb, even against truly awful NBA competition, like truly bad other teams, other players that we're playing against. But if you don't show up, you're going to lose. That's what happens.
We're going to get into it a little bit more, I'm sure, as this show goes on, because the Grizzlies loss was kind of like the rock bottom of at least this week's slate of games. But just looking at the injury report before the game, it is comical that ragtag group of individuals beat 2 all-star starters. It was just a crazy game to watch, and the final score was a lot closer than the game actually was. Those Malik Beasley threes at the very end made it look, and I mean, I guess Dame did have a shot to tie at the end, but it wasn't. I mean, it was well behind the 3-point line, but I digress.
It shouldn't even gotten to that point in general. Like, there's no reason why it was even. That was one of those games where I just looked, and when I was doing the preview, I was like, okay, who is playing for? Because I don't like no one for the Grizzlies. Like, I looked at that starting lineup and I don't recognize anyone's name there. I looked at the bench and I did not. The only name I vaguely recognized was Watanabe. I was like, I barely know. I don't even know if he's good. And this team seemingly took the Bucks' lunch money and just ran away with it like it was no one's business. And it's not as though they were shooting. I mean, yeah, they shot 50% from 3. They only took 26 threes. So it's not as though they were shooting, 40 threes and made 21 of them. It's like they made 13. And it's just sitting there like, you really lost this team? Like, this is the team that you lost to. It's embarrassing, quite frankly. That third quarter, they allowed 37 points. And that's just one of those where, kind of like with the 2 engines, it's like, there's 2 engines, and the problem is the engine seems to stall out whenever the hell it wants.
Was this, Kyle, the hardest game preview piece to do the hoop player to watch for? It had to have been because you picked literally Pat Connaughton as your player to watch, if I recall correctly. So it must
Yes,
have been a tough one to choose.
I was looking at the other ones. I was like, I don't even know who to do. And this is also what happens when I don't pay as much attention. So I was like, yeah, Pat Connaughton, because he keeps getting a lot of minutes and not doing shit with it. And it's now getting to the point of, what are we doing? What are we doing here? Because Pat played the second most minutes on the bench. Bobby Portis had 25. Pat had 24. And he was 1 of 3 from the field.
5 rebounds. You know,
you're not in there to
rebounds.
rebound. You're in there to try and make some shots. Only taking 1 3. Like, what are you doing out here?
What makes it? Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
No, I was just gonna say it's kind of a bleak point of the season where the player to watch is kind of becoming like someone needs to observe this man to hold him accountable beyond like a player to watch from an optimistic standpoint. But
yeah, and what's really messed up about the Grizzlies lost. The Grizzlies turned the ball over more than we did. They only made 2 more threes than we did. Now they shot much fewer, but they were so dominant inside the 3-point line.
They made less free throws.
They made, yeah. I mean, literally every single statistic that you would go down and be like, oh, the Bucks should have won this. I mean, that's the ridiculousness of it. And then the Heat game, what's despairing about that is, again, the engine thing. Dame has yet again another poor shooting night. Giannis has a pretty solid night from the floor, gets a double-double and all that, almost triple-doubles. But the Heat were missing a lot of their starters. I believe, I have to double-check now, but I believe both Jimmy Butler and what's their new guy? Just got traded from the Hornets, so I can't remember his name right now. Terry Rozier. So Terry Rozier was gone because of the knee. Jimmy Butler's gone. So it's like, okay, they were also on a back-to-back. They were on a road back-to-back. So in theory, everything should go our way. And then you just, as is the case with the Heat a lot of the time, apparently, except for that one series in 2021, we just really struggle getting past, especially their defense. So it's dispiriting in that you lose against a less strong Heat team. The same bugaboo is always like Spo coaches circles around us. Dame can't shoot. And then you go from that into the Grizzlies game. Like that's one of the worst 1-2 punches after it's tough to even like talk about the Nuggets game. Cause it's like, what's the real team? That's the problem we've had all season is what's the real team? And the real team that we know so far is, as Michael said, we have the 2 engines. If they both hit, great. Otherwise, we're in for a rough one. And that's kind of what it's boiled down to. And again, full display this week, and makes it that much more difficult to evaluate what's real. Like, are we really the 2-loss team? Or are we the team that's able to keep the champions, defending champs, under 100 points? It's just hard to tell day to day, week to week.
It is both. They are both.
Yeah.
Because
it's unfortunate.
My takeaway is this team, when they actually decide to give a shit, and I feel like I've said this a lot, but this really is, when they decide to care, they will play really, really good basketball and can be really, really good. We saw it in the Denver game. That was the most complete victory that the Milwaukee Bucks have had all season. And it was, other than the fourth quarter where Denver scored 32, Milwaukee was in control. And that's kind of one of those where it's like, okay, that we saw that. We saw that in the Mavericks game where they get down pretty big early on and then come back and just blitz them out of nowhere. We've seen it when they've played the Celtics where, yeah, sure. I mean, they ran them out the gym by halftime. We've seen them beat the Cavaliers. We've seen them beat the Indiana Pacers. Like, we know they can beat good teams. They started the season off with a win against the Sixers. Like, they can beat good teams. But for some reason, they just look at the schedule, and the Memphis game, I think, is a great example of, oh, we'll win this. It's fine. We'll just out-talent them. And the problem is that's not working this year. You can't just out-talent teams that are worse than you. We've seen that now. It happened against the Grizzlies. It happened against Portland. It nearly happened against Detroit countless times. It's happened against Houston, like teams that you know you should be beating. And then you're just laid an absolute egg, like the Chicago game, losing overtime. So there's a lot of just, this team just doesn't look like they want to care about the regular season. And I think a lot of it is, like Doc said, some of the guys' minds are in Cabo, and I think that's what happened. It's like you get into the All-Star break, don't want to get hurt. You're just looking ahead. So I wonder what happens when we get to next week and you're going to have 2 big games basically back to back on the road, are you going to start caring? Is this when you'll finally decide we'll be serious and go ahead? I hope so, because the schedule doesn't get easier, so you're going to have to force yourself to get it together, especially if you want to still, standing wise, stay in the top 3.
So in light of that, Kyle, the give a shitification of the Milwaukee Bucks. I know we had the Cabo comments. Doc was sort of complaining at All-Star Weekend that he took over. He wish you could have held off until the All-Star Weekend. How are you feeling about Doc after 10 games? How are we feeling about the way he's handling the team, the way he's working with the media? He's the guy who has the cachet, who can come out and say my guys were in Cabo mentally and kind of throw guys under the bus without it apparently like being a huge rupture. But what are you feelings about Doc after 10 games with these kind of being the capper right before the break?
I will give Doc Rivers this credit. He seems to have gotten Milwaukee's defense at least in a positive direction, which is a good thing. So that is nice to see that Milwaukee's defense has managed to improve, especially in transition. I'm still not sold on him because that rotation that he is throwing out there is bad. Other than playing AJ Green. Like, I get it. I get playing Bobby. I get playing Pat Beverly. I'm glad he's playing AJ Green, but I don't know why we're still doing this Pat Connaughton thing yet. So I'm still not sold. I'm still going to complain, but at least defensively, there's improvement there. So that is a positive to see at the very least. Maybe there's at least some progress that we have not, and a plan that seems to be put in place that we did not see with Adrian Griffin.
Michael, how about you? What's your 10-game Doc evaluation?
I mean, the comments in the media are a little concerning. I mean, it's kind of what you expect from Doc Rivers at this point. And like you kind of mentioned, he has the history and the experience to kind of make those comments and have it not be the end of the world the same way it would be for a guy like Adrian Griffin, maybe, who doesn't have that kind of reputation. But it does seem like, especially on the defensive side of the ball, we have way more of a sense of direction. And I think that it would have been nice to see Doc from the jump, because it's a little early to tell still. I don't know if this is the sign of, like he said, like guys looking ahead, guys not really flipping the switch yet. But 10 games in, I mean, I can't give it above like a C- just because of the W's and the L's, but it's not as bad as the record makes it seem, I don't think.
Yeah. It's very difficult, and this will be part of my point as well, but it's very difficult now to tell how much of the issues we see on the court are because they're trying to implement another new system on offense and defense. The defense seems to have caught ahead. We're up to 17th in the league. Like, we're slowly but surely, week by week, climbing Mount Everest. But what I guess is concerning to me is there's this mismatch between not caring from the players, if that's how we want to characterize it, and then we're getting a lot of minutes on guys. Giannis played almost 37 minutes against the Grizzlies at a loss, which is horrific. The rotations, as you said, I think it's ironic that Kyle, the coach that you were least excited about, fulfills your prophecy that AJ Green would finally make his way off the bench. So I like that has to, you have to have that yin and yang there. But if I were the players, right, like, I get it. We're mostly 30-plus-year-old men. We've had over a decade of experience in the NBA. We know how this goes. But, like, in their heart of hearts, can they say the Dame Lillard's experience integrating him has gone as smoothly as it could? And if that's the case, let's say in their heart of hearts they know it's not going as well as it could. Wouldn't you think even against the crappy teams, you would be slightly incentivized to, like, try to work it out a little bit, like take it a little more seriously? Because I've lived so many years as a Bucks fan where they say they don't even say anything, but we say on this podcast around April, oh, they're going to flip a switch once the playoffs come. And then they just get clowned on, or they barely survive and they win the title, which is a great outcome. But just the numbers show that normally they're not going to flip a switch, because it's just like That's just a thing that people latch on to like convince themselves that it's going to turn out okay after they watch 8 months of horrific basketball or like substandard basketball. And that's just like a hard mentality to like stomach watching from home. It's like you're getting all these reps. Doc is force feeding these guys a ton of minutes, and yet it is this weird energy disconnect. There's this weird like, okay, why aren't guys playing together as well as they could? You're not going to have practice time. If you're going to figure out how to play as a team together as a team, now is the opportunity to do it. And it just for some reason guys aren't latching on to that, it seems. Now the only other thing I will say in support of Doc and the way that the team is playing, when the playoffs get here, you hope that the fact that a lot of defense or the games slow down a ton will again feed back into the defense. Then you get into your trench warfare offense, and it's okay. Worst players to have for a trench warfare fight than Dame Lillard, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Chris Middleton. So I guess that's just what we're gambling on, but that's just a hard pill to swallow as a fan who watches week to week and then sees them drop these real gimme games. And then guys are getting a ton of wear and tear on top of everything else. So. Yeah, it's not, and again, maybe guys
vibes are not great.
No, they might have just, understandably been ready for the break. But again, you come back, you're going to have, not that many games left, and they're all difficult games. And you're going to, now we're going to figure out the Dame Lillard thing. Like maybe he just starts making threes again after winning the 3-point contest. Maybe that fixes everything. But on the off chance that he doesn't all of a sudden turn back into himself, I'm not sure I would say the rest of the team is doing a good job inspiring confidence that they'll be able to pick up the slack, with the asterisk that Chris is out with the ankle sprain. But that's another complicating factor. How does Chris look when he gets back as well? So a lot of question marks. There's been question marks all season long. And then, of course, they have the great Nuggets win. Everyone's like, yeah, we're high-fiving each other. Like, we did it. Mission accomplished. And then they just immediately lose two close to gimmies, which is very typically Bucks. So, yeah.
It's like a pathetic gambler getting one big win right before they're about to walk away.
Yeah,
like
they bring me back in. Yeah.
Vicious cycle.
Every time I say I'm done watching the Bucks, they're like, "Hey, check out this win, though." I'm like, "All right, I'm back," and they're like, "All right, never mind again."
Yeah, it's honestly one of those where I was like, "Okay, yeah, they beat the Hornets, but like, okay, whatever." And then it turned out and beat the Nuggets. Like, oh, no, maybe they've got it. And then it was like, no, we're just kidding. We're not there. We are not back. And I'm sure next week they're gonna get a win or 1 or 2 wins. I'll be like, all right, I'm back in. Let's do it.
Yeah. They'll go 2-0 next week, and we'll be like, just needed the time off. Let Doc cook. Give Doc a couple of practices and let him cook. Yeah, it's a fun roller coaster, isn't it?
Yeah. Riley, did you go through your what you learned, or I know you kind of
No, so what I learned is kind of tied into all that. So we're reaching the point now with Doc where C- I think is the best grade we can give it by far. Defense improvement is great, that we all identified as the biggest issue, but obviously we're losing a lot. So for me now, we're getting to an interesting point where how much of the struggles are the coaching staff or the core players that we have. And I think this is a good topic to bring up with this trio in particular, because Kyle did everything he could to get Andrew Wiggins and Jonathan Kuminga. And we, us three, went through and we identified, here's some of the problem spots and here's ways we could fix it in terms of the players on the roster. If you go through this season and we look as lackadaisical, as lacking in urgency as we have, given the fact that it's a veteran team, they know it's the 82 games don't matter. But let's just say they go through, maybe they get through the first round, and then if they lose in the second round, or even in my opinion, anything less than a finals berth, I'm going to be pretty close to starting calling a lot of these core pieces a group of loser players. Not in the sense of they can't win games, because that's not true. But I just wonder if it's becoming much more obvious, painfully so for us, that we've let the core group sit around for maybe a little too long. Maybe we need to shuffle things a lot earlier. Like a couple examples, Bobby Portis, obviously people are turning on him. It's not because Bobby's doing anything radically different from what he did in the past, but when he's burning possessions with ISO ball, it's like, okay, if he's not hitting, then it's like, why is Bobby out there? The defense is bad. Pat Connaughton looks like a husk of himself. He looks like he fell right off a cliff. Jay Crowder, Kyle and I we're ready at Mitchell International. We will pack your bags for you. We've been ready to pack your bags. Thanasis, people are starting to turn on Thanasis, people being like the wider league, which is pretty rare that players and people around that would like start talking shit about Thanasis. So that's not a good sign for him. Brooke Lopez has had a weird relationship with Dame, it seems. We've had 2 incidents in the course of like 3 weeks where Brooke called his own shot in Portland, and then in the Grizzlies game, he sets the pick on Dame rather than on the guy guarding Dame, and we end up losing the game. Brooke had a active play part in getting Griffin fired. I said at the time, if you do that, you're putting a target on your back of, okay, if you're going to be a guy who's going to just like try and get your coach fired, you can't be sticking around all that long because you're important, but you're Brooke Lopez. So I just wonder, easier said than done, but I would be shocked if this team, as I expect, are not going to reach the finals. And then we don't look back and say, okay, we needed to figure out the Brooke Lopez replacement like a long time ago, some sort of alternate. Bobby and Pat, like we just held on to these guys a little too long with the assumption that they be based off the title win, largely they have the formula. There was nothing about that title winning team outside of the fact that Giannis was on the team that I would say it was replicable or like gave me a lot of confidence we were a dynasty in the waiting. We have never been a dynasty in the waiting. Just because Giannis is here, that makes you a contender, but that does not make us a dynasty. And if you're not a dynasty like the Warriors, you can't be letting dudes on the bench hang out year after year. And it's just like the results have been so bad. And then just say, extensions / let's just kind of wait it out and see if we can get, Marvin Williams or Pau Gasol to sort it out. So it's kind of a come to Jesus moment for me. This is not surprising. We talked about it around the trade deadline that a lot of these guys are starting to turn into deadwood a little bit. It just does not also help that Dame has been so lackluster relative to expectations, and that's not helping things. But if he's going to be lackluster, you need the rest of the guys to step up. And so far, I can't say a single guy has. Malik has been good for what I expected of him. Other than that, I can't say anybody else has really like wowed me with their season so far. So come to Jesus moment for the roster is my takeaway this week.
I think that's kind of the hardest part about all this is kind of looking at the team and just being like, there's a reason why I made that trade, because you needed something different. You have to think of like, if you think about this core, like Giannis, Brooke, Chris, we'll just include Pat, because like those 4 have been there since Budenholzer's first season. Like that has been the core since 2018. And then you add Bobby, who comes in shortly, a couple of years later, but he's now been there, 3-4 years. Like you're looking at this core, and other than the Warriors, you don't see a team keep that kind of core that long. And I think that's part of the issue. And then you add to the fact of now they have these large contracts where Chris has this large contract. Giannis they deserve it. And it's one of those where like, it makes sense you gave them these larger contracts based on what they did, but now you're kind of pigeonholing yourself because now it's hoping that you really hit on the margins of these like minimum guys, which they're not doing. And the problem is the guys they bring in are most of the time old. You're not really bringing in a lot of youth. And this also what happens when you both bomb on your draft picks, but then also have to trade your draft picks to acquire, these superstar level talents. Like you traded a lot of draft picks to get Drew Holiday. It works out immediately in year 1. But then the problem was it starts not working the next couple of years. And then you don't have those draft picks. And when you do have these second round picks, you're bringing in guys that might not be good enough. You bring in Mamu and that doesn't work. You draft Marjan, that doesn't seem to work. You
You
guys,
get Rodney Hood, you get Shemi Ojale, you start
yeah,
picking off the yeah.
you start bringing in guys that aren't really helping, and then there's no youth to like take that next step, which is why I was like, when we saw with Andre Jackson Jr. at the beginning of the season, we're like, oh, this is good. There's another younger piece that you can add. You can have him replace one of these guys in the core. And now he's basically just rotting on the bench. AJ Green seems to have gotten those minutes at least, but it's kind of one of those where you have to break up this core. It's getting too old. It's not going to work long enough. And when you're paying all that salary to these guys, that Chris cannot stay healthy anymore. Brook, it's still wild to expect him at his age to be as effective as he can be. Right. And he's shooting all these threes half the time and calling his own shot. I don't know. Bobby, we knew of the limitations. The difference is it's fine when he's not making $9-10 million. It's fine when he's only making 1 or 2, and you can take him out of the rotation and put in someone else, and it's fine. But now you have to have him in your rotation because your other options don't work. And I think that's kind of the tough part is you're just kind of looking, it's like, how do you reinvent this core? Besides, you have to make a trade that is going to hurt feelings, and it might piss people off, which is why I said you might have to trade Chris. You might have to trade Brook. You're going to have to make a move to reinvent this core, because constantly just shuffling through guys on vet minimum deals isn't working, and it probably will not work.
If this roster blows up like spectacularly, do y'all think it's an indictment on kind of the player GM influence that's kind of happened in the last 10 years in the NBA? Because I mean, it's not really working for Kevin Durant and the Suns, it seems. He kind of had a lot of influence building that roster. It was the same way in Brooklyn. And this just feels like a lot of these decisions were kind of either made directly with Giannis's approval or kind of based on the assumption that it was being built around him.
That's a really good question. I think it's not as much of an indictment of the player influence era as much it is sorry, a indictment of the GMs not having the courage of their convictions era. Right. Like and there are different superstars. Some are more reasonable than others. I tend to believe that Giannis is relatively reasonable. Like, what do we know about Giannis when it comes to team building? He does not want to play center full time. Okay. So Brook Lopez has to stick around. If you trade Brook Lopez out, you have to have what's going to be the fill-in, and it has to make sense to some extent. But you have to also have the courage of your convictions of this trade is what we have to make for the good of the team. And I can explain to Giannis, no, we're not leaving you out to dry, or this is how this is going to work. Like, this is why ultimately this will be good for the team. So maybe it's more so it was just easier once Horst had assembled all the pieces, because it's hard to assemble a title tein that once you get it all together, keep them paid, keep everybody around, and hopefully you catch lightning in a bottle a second time. But I wouldn't say outside of Thanasis, obviously, like that's quite obvious that's just Giannis cashing checks for his brother, which is whatever. I wouldn't necessarily call it an indictment of player influence for the Bucks in particular. But Kyle, I'd be interested in your answer.
I don't think so, because I don't think it's really an indictment. I think it just shows that trying to appease, it's just really difficult to try and appease your star player. And I don't think that's necessarily, player GM. That's just, especially when you're the Milwaukee Bucks, you're not going to be bringing in free agents. Like when you're Brooklyn, you're not going to be able to bring in free agents. Phoenix, you're not really, like, it's hard for some of these teams even now. And I feel like it's not even a market anymore. It's just the fact of it's hard to bring in free agents, because most of the time those top free agents, they're not going to move because they can make a lot more money staying with their current team. So then it's a matter of, do I want to leave and try and win a championship? Some players, you like a Luka Doncic, like, is he going to want to leave Dallas if he can't win a championship? I don't know. He might want to win a championship, but at the same time, if he's going to get paid the supermax, why bother going? Like, why leave? And I think it's more of that. There's less, which is kind of like a both good and bad thing. There's less incentive for players to just leave and go win a championship if you can make so much money out of it. And then everyone's going to look and be like, well, it's not his fault. Like, if Luka stays, like, maybe people will be like, okay, you got to start winning. I mean, we gave Joel Embiid a giant pass for God knows how long for not even making a conference finals. And yet, I think now people have turned now that he got his MVP. But before, it's like, yeah, we'll just give him a pass. It's not his fault. He had Doc Rivers as a coach. He had Ben Simmons decide not to take a dunk at the last second. Like, it's not, you can't blame James Harden is a choker. But I think it's just more teams are definitely trying to do too much and make gambles to keep their star players, and it's not working out. Like Kevin Durant in Phoenix, like that, I wouldn't say that's been working. Obviously, with Giannis, that hasn't been working. Even LeBron, with all the guys he wants in, half of them don't work out. So I think it's just most of it is kind of there's a reason why GMs make the decisions, and maybe some of them are just gonna have to be like, no, I'm the GM. I'm gonna do what's best. I'm gonna work with the coach. We're gonna bring the roster that is going to make the most sense for us to win. And I think we'll start seeing a shift in that just because, I mean, we'll see what John Horst does, because now that he's got Giannis's extension signed, John Horst can be like, sucks to suck. Good luck with that. I'm now going to completely change the score because we want to win. So,
Yeah.
What do you think, Michael?
I think both things can be true. I do kind of like the shifting of the argument from pointing at the players and their kind of inflated, I guess, demands, and kind of pointing to the timid, people-pleasing GMs, because I do think in a lot of ways those are the bigger catalysts. And like y'all said, it's super hard to keep like all the pieces together during multiple title runs. Like not everyone has the luxury of like Kevin Durant signing in free agency or something. Like if you build around trades, there's going to be downsides. You're not going to have draft capital. You're not going to have young guys. And most of the time you're not going to have depth. So there's definitely two sides to that coin. And I don't know if blaming the star is always, it sometimes might be, but it's definitely not like a black and white situation.
Yeah, typically I usually think of it as overblown unless it's like a James Harden or somebody, or like PJ Tucker is very low on the level, but any guy who like goes public with it, demanding or like being unreasonable, that's when I'm like, okay, now we can go after this guy. But for the most part, I tend to assume the aspersions about player influence are a little overblown. I think it's the LeBron clutch agency that's an interesting kind of fold to it, but Giannis's agent is literally a Greek guy who helps hook us up with other Greek guys. So it's not like we have a super agency problem necessarily. So I think it does apply to certain teams, but not so much to the Bucks. I think it's just extremely hard to acquire the pieces where we're at. And we're extremely lucky to have Giannis and then to have gotten Chris at such a young age where essentially he was as close to a rookie as he was a sophomore when we got him. So sure. We just happen to be lucky by that, and it's very difficult. But it is also difficult to pull the trigger then on switching the other guys around. But I think we're getting to the point now when you look at this roster, like this has to be the run. Like if we're coming back, like Malik Beasley can leave for more money in the offseason. We don't have his bird rights. He's shot really well. He's young. Like he could go to another team. If Jay Crowder's still on this team next year, I mean, what are we doing? Patrick Beverley is going to be a free agent. Who knows if he wants to come back or if he might retire? Like he's close to the end of his career. And then the drop off, I mean, depending on how much you believe in Andre Jackson Jr. and Marjan and AJ Green to a certain extent, like the drop off past that is pretty staggering. So this has to be the run. I don't think Horst has much of a choice. And even if that means he's not going to get quote unquote full value for some of the guys, I can't imagine running this core back out there again, assuming a failure in the postseason and it being like all cool. Like, oh, don't worry, Dame will be cool next season. You're like, okay, sure. I believe you, I guess. So it's just very curious the spot that we find ourselves in with how lackluster this whole season has been overall.
Yeah. All right. Do we care enough about Danilo Gallinari joining to say anything?
I forgot about him.
Yeah, no. Okay, cool. We're gonna pass on that then. We're gonna go over to Buck the Host. So as we have been very negative and down, we're gonna decide to put a spin on it. So we are going to be encouraging. We're gonna have a positivity. So if you've heard us for the first 37 minutes and said, why are these guys complaining? Don't worry, we're gonna give you some positives. So what is one Bucks thing that gives you hope or has you be positive about for the remainder of the season? Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, for me, When I can't think of a lot of positives internally, I like to just bring others down to my level. And looking at the East versus West format of the All-Star game gives me a lot of hope about the postseason because the East is a lot thinner. I mean, assuming that Boston is the 1 seed, Cleveland's 1 game ahead of the Bucks right now, but the star power in the East is really just not moving me. I mean, outside of Boston, you've got the Pacers, they're kind of a thorn team, but I'm not really terrified of them. It's not super deep, and I think any of them could probably beat us, but I think we could beat just about any of them too. So the fact that we don't have to go up against like the Grizzlies, I'm kidding, but the teams in the West are definitely more scary in a 4 games or a 7 game series for sure.
Michael was born to be on Dear Diaries because that's bringing others down to our level is exactly what this podcast and this show is all about. So
He gets it. He gets it.
yeah, some people get it, some people don't, but Michael gets it. Yeah. It's like the argument that we're bad, but everybody else has the potential to be much worse. That sounds like the Milwaukee Bucks of the 2020s. So yeah, it sounds about right to me.
All right, Riley, what about you?
Man, this is so lame. Okay, so the true thing to be positive about is Giannis hasn't given up yet. So we have Giannis and he hasn't given up. I think he genuinely, as insane as he is, I think he believes that we still can do this thing. And if he believes we can do this thing, I hope that he can drag the rest of the guys around to say, hey, you guys can also care and we could win. So Giannis being out there. But the other thing that I feel good about is no matter how bad the rest of the regular season is, the Bucks have taught me that home court advantage doesn't mean a single thing to them. They don't care at all. We could be the 8 seed and I would feel just as comfortable as if we were the 1 seed and we had home court throughout. I've seen them waste home court advantage year after year after year. So in conjunction with Michael's point, no matter how far we fall, no matter how bad we are, assuming we don't literally fall into the play-in games, I have full confidence that if something's going to happen, it does not need to happen on their home court. So that is my positivity is the Bucks have taught me, don't worry about home court. And Giannis is on the team. He hasn't given up yet.
That is fair. I like the Giannis hasn't given up because in spite of this whole season, Giannis has played really, really, really well the whole time. I don't think we've really had that many stretches where we've looked at Giannis and be like, what are you doing? Why? Like, it hasn't happened to my memory. So I think that's a good thing for Giannis. My positive is actually more so the kind of going into kind of a little bit of Michael's point and a little bit of Riley's point, where I don't care what happens in the regular season. The regular season truly does not matter to me because I will still take Milwaukee in a 7-game series against any team in the East not named Boston right now with no hesitation.
Sure.
And even with Boston, I'm like, yeah, they can win it. They can win a 7-game series. And I think a lot of it is because you still have Giannis, you still have Dame. And I don't need, yes, Dame's going to be inconsistent, but you know what also helps? Having another guy that I can trust to get hot and take over a game. That is more than, and this is something Milwaukee has not had. We've had to hope that Chris Middleton does it. We have to hope that Drew Holiday could do it. We have to hope that Bobby Portis or Brook Lopez does it. I don't like, that's one of the things you have to hope. Well, Damian Lillard, it's just a matter of when and not if. For me, I still have enough faith in Dame that there is enough evidence in the past for me to be like, okay, you know what? I still feel confident he can figure it out. And he just needs to figure it out by the postseason. I put it in the chat. I don't need Dame. I don't care how Dame does from November to March. I need to know how he does from April and May and hopefully June. That is what matters. And I think, and I still have faith in him being able to do that. So just get to the playoffs and I think they'll be okay.
I was waiting for Kyle to say his positive take was the fact that Adrian Green is getting minutes and is on course for a playoff rotation spot. But I'm glad you went the
We're getting there. We're getting there. I don't trust Doc Rivers yet because I feel like Doc Rivers will still throw it all away at the last second just to spite me. So, all right. Well, that was again, we were positive, so good for us. So we're gonna jump over to our miscellaneous area. So I have the rapid fire for this week, and I have a very simple one to start off with. What is your favorite scent?
Favorite scent?
Yeah, like
I'm at Yankee Candle or just
like, what
in
is
the
something
world.
that if you smell it, you're just like, yes, that. If you just get a whiff of it, it's like, yes.
Wet asphalt for me, like on the track at school, man. Like going out for my track runs, I was like, here we go. I'm in here. Like if it had rained a little bit, it was a little misty in the mornings. Like I was gonna put on for my city on the JV track team.
Yeah. Michael smells wet asphalt, and he said, "I'm about to give it my all. I'm going all out for the squad right now."
Yeah, I was about to get 7th place so hard, like but
you're like grabbing your jersey, like grabbing for the school on there. You're doing the kiss on the jersey. That's funny.
Oh yeah.
I'll be honest. Wet asphalt was not what I was expecting everybody's answer to be. I would say, I like the smell, if I can call it that, of like the first fresh snowfall of the year, where it's very quiet and you just like that. And there's like that moisture. It's like almost a little metallic. I associate it with living in the Midwest, being like up north all the way around everywhere. So I like the smell of the first snow of the season.
That's a good one.
That is a good one. I was gonna go with like going in a forest, like just like a deep forest, like the pine. I don't know. It's just kind of nice, and maybe it's just like you're going for a hike and you're just in nature, and it feels like, okay, this is completely uninterrupted by whatever else pollution. I don't know. Just the smell of a forest.
Yeah,
that's what I got.
I like
something about escaping like industrial smells that are so common in like streets and buildings.
Nice. All right. Next one I got is, what is the strangest habit that you have?
That's a good one.
This is very obscure, but I've gotten in a really bad habit of just saying like so and so is gonna have that, like in any situation. Like watching a Bucks game, like no joke, like anytime Giannis is like driving down, like I'm thinking, oh, Giannis is gonna have that, or Giannis is having that. It's a bad habit.
Bad habit, a strange habit. I'm not sure if I have like a lot of strange habits per se. I'm not sure if I have that. If I would say I have a ton of habits as it is. I don't know. Staying up too late, is that a strange habit? I would have to come back to this. Yeah, that's just. I'll have to think about it. I'll come back with a better answer next week.
I know mine. It's walking out of the house without my keys.
Oh, that is a good one.
And it's even worse now that my car is just like the push to start. So I don't even have to put the key in. So I just walk out assuming I have it. And then I step in the car and I start. I'm like, where is crap? Thankfully, this is why I have multiple spare keys hidden around the garage in the backyard for that moment where I lock myself out. All right. So the Bucks have, in the last couple of years, they've lost 17 games in 2019-2020, 26 in 2020-2021, so shortened COVID year, 31 in 2021-2022, and then 24 games last year. The Bucks have currently lost 21 games. So over or under 35.5 losses this year.
Ooh. How many? Let me pull up how many games we have left first, just so we know.
They have played 56 games.
Okay, so we have. We're gonna be challenged to do quick math. So what we got? 35 games.
26
left?
games.
26.
26.
We have 26 games. Okay, so we would need to lose now 16 of those to hit the over.
That would be
15
depressing.
Of those. 15. That would be really depressing. I'm going to take the under, but I'm definitely far less confident in that than I would have expected once the Griffin firing happened. So I'll take the under, but it's not a very strong under.
I agree. I'm also taking the under, but like Riley said, like if you told me that in the preseason that was going to be like a sweat, I would have been disappointed, to say the least.
Yeah, to say the least. Yeah, go look at our preseason prediction post and just be like, was anybody anywhere near close 30 losses or no?
I don't think anyone had losses. I think we just went with seeding, and
Oh yeah,
I know I was very confident in a title. I think
Yeah.
I'm almost certain. I think I said they're going to win the title.
Yeah.
So, all right, and then the last question: what is a TV show or movie that everyone should watch, in your opinion?
I think everybody should watch the whichever one of the Mighty Ducks movies where they go and they're like at prep school or whatever, and then they get the gang back together. I think it's a testament to old friendships and the ability to work together as a team. And I just watched that movie so much as a kid. There's no such thing as essential media, but I like the Mighty Ducks movie, so we'll go that one.
All right.
For me, I think it's SpongeBob SquarePants, like the first like 3 seasons of it. It's just influenced my humor so much, and I feel like a lot of my people kind of in my age group say the same thing. It's like I would be surprised if I go a week without making like at least one like 2002 SpongeBob episode reference, like here and there.
It's a foundational text for sure. It's a foundational
For sure. That's exactly how I would describe it.
I would it's kind of similar. I'm going to go with any Cartoon Network or Nickelodeon, like 90s cartoons. So I would say like Ed, Ed, and Eddie would be a strong one.
Very
Courage the
good.
Cowardly Dog, Fairly Odd Parents. Just one of those 90s, early 2000 cartoons. You got to watch one of those. SpongeBob falls into that category. And then the other thing is I just need everyone to watch Space Jam because it is it is one of the greatest movies ever made. And I don't care that Michael Jordan basically phones it in. It's a classic.
As a kid, when you're a stupid kid, you don't know that MJ's phoning it in. You're like, damn, this is the coolest movie I've literally ever seen in my whole life.
And then you watch when you're older, it's like he's phoning it in, but you know what? It's still fun.
Yeah, he's
And
still
it's
cooking
quick.
though.
Yeah, for me, that almost like makes it a little sillier. And at the end of the day, it's entertainment. I mean, I wasn't expecting him to hoist an Oscar about it, but you know.
Yeah. All right. Riley, you didn't have any fountain pen stuff, correct?
Not this week. I'll have something next week though.
All right. I do have a movie. It's been a while since I've done a movie, I just realized. I did Bullet Train, the newer one. I don't know how to describe this movie, you guys. It was, if you want 2 hours of was this absolutely necessary, and you're sitting there questioning that the whole damn time, this is the perfect movie for that. It is just 2 hours of I don't know what's going on. I don't get the plot. It's like Brad Pitt is just making jokes left and right. Like, I cannot take this movie seriously. I don't know if it's supposed to be serious. Is it supposed to be a comedy? Maybe. It's an action, I guess. But I don't know. It's, again, it is like 2 hours of you just sitting there. It's kind of if you just want to put a movie on and not have to fully pay attention, this is a great option. I will say that. Like, this is a good, like, just throw it on, maybe do some stuff in the background, maybe like just hang out. Like, if you had friends over, you just put that movie on and just want people to make fun of it, this would be a great option. But I don't know. It kind of felt like it was trying to be this like funny thriller-esque aspect of it. I don't know. And I think the cast is also just like, all right, these are people. Like, you got Brad Pitt. It's like, yep, that's a person. You got Aaron Taylor Johnson. I'm like, yeah, he was in Kick-Ass. All right, yeah, and I recognize him. Brian Tyree Henry. I was like, I don't know if you guys are trying to be serious or not. Sandra Bullock's in it for a bit. Like, it's trying to incorporate the old Japanese film and have it be more Western. And it's just, I don't know. Like I said, it's 2 hours of what the hell is going on. And yet I want to keep watching because I want to see if I can figure out what the hell is going on.
How was Bad Bunny in this? I see that Bad Bunny was he good?
I don't even remember. Like I barely remember. I was like, oh yeah,
He was not hoisting the Oscar for his performances.
No.
I'm like looking at this. So this is, and I've seen a lot of movies lately where I'm like, this is obviously just a front for money laundering by like shady production companies. Like, why? Who? And they had to have burned a lot of money to get Brad Pitt to do this. So like, and they thought that was a good idea. Are you sure? I assume it probably actually wasn't a good idea to burn all that money on Brad Pitt. So I just assumed this is like funnily Saudi oil money or something like that. And we just had to have a couple of people to have like an end product. So at least it leaned into being weird-ish, I guess. I don't know.
I think so. I think at least I feel like they did intend for it to lean into the funny, like weird aspect. I don't think it was like trying to be serious.
Live Golf has entered cinema.
Probably.
I mean, yeah, they'll be owning the Bucks soon, and then I'll be watching all the movies they help produce. So I'm looking forward to it. Made some money though, so shout out to that. They did make some money off of it.
It surprisingly made money. I don't know how.
Yeah. You know the production companies were like, yikes, when they saw the final product and then just did numbers. They're like, I always believed.
They were like, you know what? We got Brad Pitt. If we put Brad Pitt in it, we have a chance.
Yeah, we're cooking. All right, cool.
And it worked.
Much like the Milwaukee Bucks, they said, hey, Giannis is out there. It might just work. Maybe it will. So the Milwaukee Bucks are the 2022 bullet train of the NBA. So
Oh no.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, that was my film review. I give it a 4. I truly don't know what the hell is going on. And this is one of those where it's like, I'm not going to rewatch it to find out. So that is, if you want to watch it, it's on Netflix. If you got 2 hours to burn, find something better. All right. So weekly prediction. So All-Star break is still going. So the Bucks will play Friday at Minnesota. So over in Riley's neck of the woods, they play the Timberwolves. I think it starts at 9. So good luck staying awake for that. And then Sunday, they travel to Philly to take on the Sixers. It is at noon. This could be concerning. But those are the 2 games we got this week. So Michael, what is your prediction for the next week of Bucks games?
I think they go 2-0. I mean, those are 2 tough games. But I think that, I mean, they just lost to Minnesota the other day. So it's hard to beat a team twice in this league. And I think that after All-Star break, they're going to be reinvigorated. They're going to be ready to take the court. And then the 76ers kind of, I mean, Embiid's still hurt, kind of an underachieving team right now. I think it's a comfortable 2-0. They have a little bit of rest, a little bit of time to get back into the zone. I'm going to say 2-0.
Riley?
I'm gonna say 1-1. I think the return of Pat Bev to the place where he shed tears. I think that's a special moment for him. The Bucks did play the Timberwolves after they had went through the trade deadline and Chris was gone, so they were already down a little bit. I mean, not to say that campaign was going to really swing the thing in Milwaukee's favor per se, but you're still missing a guy. And I believe in the power of friendship and that they're building that relationship over the All-Star break. And hopefully that will power them through. And they will lose to the Sixers because it's a midday game. And as we saw against the Grizzlies, it does not matter that the other team is missing their most important players. We are extremely adept at losing those games. So I will say 1-1, but will not be at all surprised if they go 0-2 to start the ceremonial second half of the season.
I am also saying 1-1. I think they lose to the Timberwolves. Just not feeling great about that. And I think Doc Rivers is going for revenge. I think this is where, as Riley predicted, the Doc Rivers revenge tour to the title. He wants this win. He wants that. I think the Bucks, and after the Bucks lose to the Timberwolves, are going to want to get their ish together. And yes, I think 1-1. Beat the Sixers, lose to the Timberwolves. So, Riley, are you going to that game?
No, it's unfortunate. I do usually make the sojourn, and I do get good seats so that I can just absolutely heckle the hell out of the Timberwolves players. But We'll be going on a vacation to Belize the week after that, and I don't feel like trying to catch an illness off the Target Center faithful. So I will be missing this time. And also 9 p.m. start, and the Wolves are actually good. So those tickets are going to be absolutely insane. And I'm not paying $150 a ticket to watch us lose by 30. So
You're not paying nosebleed, 150
I'm not.
nosebleeds at 9
No, I'm
p.m.
not. No. I'm not going to be doing that. So they'll have to carry on without me, but I believe in the team regardless.
All right. So that is our episode. Thank you for listening. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share this with everyone. Make sure to follow us at brewhoop.com. As Riley mentioned, Jackson has done a great job at covering stuff for All-Star Weekend. We got the Monday morning media roundup. We'll have the Tuesday tracker. I will have something for Wednesday for the weekly roundup. It will talk about Doc Rivers trends. I don't think we're doing question and antlers anymore. I think that has been donezo until proven otherwise. But we still have other great content. So make sure to follow us there, and we will talk to you again later.